You know, in Ecclesiastes 1:7, it describes a hydrologic cycle, which wasn't known at the time.
No. What was known at that time is that somehow the streams keep on flowing and somehow the ocean still isn't full. And what was commonly believed at that time was that water came up out of the earth through springs. That's what Ecclesiastes implies. It doesn't say anything about evaporation or condensation because no one knew about either of those things. They didn't really even know precipitation. And chapter 38 of the book of Job confirms this, with God himself saying that he is the father of the dew and that he keeps lightning, snow, and hail inside of storehouses.
It was believed during biblical times that the oceans were just flat on the bottom. No one had any clue that there were mountains in the oceans or springs in the seas. We know that now from sonar, but that wasn't known or believed back then. But Jonah 2:56 talks about the mountains and the oceans.
And Ezekiel 26 prophesies the destruction of the island city of Tyre at the hand of King Nebuchadnezzar. That prophecy failed on several significant points, but the city did eventually fall, at least momentarily, to a different invader a couple centuries later. Alexander the Great took the city by building a causeway, extending a peninsula out to the island, connecting it to the mainland. So there's no way they didn't know that an island is but a mountain in the sea.
Jonah 2:56.
You're talking about Jonah 2, verse 6, not 56. Wherein it does not talk about mountains beneath the sea, but the roots of mountains, meaning the foundations of the mountains that form the islands above the sea. So again, yes, even way back then, they already knew that islands were the tops of mountains that were rooted in the sea.
Job 38:16 describes the springs in the seas.
As I just mentioned a moment ago, Job 38 says a lot of crazy things that we know are not true. That came up a moment ago where God says he keeps lightning bolts and snow in storage rooms. And we'll look at Job 38 again in the very next episode. But for the moment, let's remind you that it also has God himself saying that the earth is flat, taking the shape of clay under a seal. And he says that it has foundations, footing, and a cornerstone. It even says that the stars sing and that the sea is shut behind doors. Doors. That's what Dutko means by springs. See, in the ancient cosmology on which the Bible is based, the earth was thought to be a flat disk erected on pillars and covered by a giant crystal dome called a firmament. And there were supposed to be windows in this giant dome to let in the water above the firmament, because the simple people who wrote the Bible thought of the earth as a snow globe immersed in a vast oceanic abyss. And they imagined springs below the earth would let water in or draw water out as well. And all of this was already known to be false, even while the Bible was still being written wrongly.
Do you know that some engineers, some non-believing atheist engineers, wrote an article for Smithsonian.com? I documented two in my top 10 proofs. For Smithsonian, saying, we were just curious about the mythological story of Noah's Ark. Would it be possible to create some kind of a big boat that could carry that size cargo of animals and survive being in the waters without tipping over or sinking or whatever?
In an attempt to find whichever Smithsonian article Dutko is referring to, I looked up his top 10 proofs online. I expected to see a web page listing 10 misunderstood and misrepresented assumptions asserted as if they were facts or as if they meant something that they didn't. And I thought that somewhere in there I might find a link to the Smithsonian article he was talking about. But what I found instead was a grift. Over 3 dozen CDs of Bob Dutco droning on about things he knows nothing at all about. Understand that for the high price of hundreds of dollars, you can have 46 consecutive hours of Bob Dutco's raving insanity. That's a dollar store value marked up 300% so that he can then pretend to shave a bit off the top and offer it to you on sale. And his gullible rubes are so credulous, they actually buy into it. Remember the previous 17 episodes of this playlist where we showed how Dutko is absolutely wrong about absolutely everything he said, where he hasn't been right about anything yet, nothing that is both factually accurate and indicative of his conclusions. This series so far only corrects 2/3 of one 1-hour sermon. How much wronger would he be if you let him drone on literally for days, 46 hours of nonstop nonsense from a know-nothing professional liar being wrong all over everything. But wait, there's more. For just $20 a pop, you can hear every ill-informed opinion this ignorant, bigoted idiot ever had. Man, religion is such a sweet scam. All you got to do is lie to people who want to be lied to so that they can make believe what we all know is not really true. If I didn't have ethics or a sense of pride or honor or shame, if accuracy and accountability didn't matter to me at all, if truth didn't matter to me, I would be rich as a preacher.
So these structural engineers decided to calculate the exact calculations through engineering of what the length to width to height ratio and everything would need to be in displacement of water to figure out. And you know what they said? And I quote them in their Smithsonian.com story. They say, we don't believe in the story of Noah's Ark, of course. But in an amazing coincidence, it happens to describe the exact perfect engineering ratio details for a seaworthy craft.
Having come this far along in our playlist, you probably won't be at all surprised to learn that when I read the article and played the audio interview too, both of which are linked below, I found that that is not what they really said. When asked how accurate their findings were, these graduate students replied that they're only accurate to a degree and that their many approximations and assumptions were, in their own words, a bit woolly. They even cautioned that readers should take their results with a pinch of salt. That woolly pinch of salt approximation is what Bob Dutco declared to be exact perfect engineering. Obviously, he failed to heed their warning about not putting too much stock into this.
That's the only ratio that they came up with is the one that's written in the Bible. So they call that an amazing coincidence. I don't think it is.
I actually agree. It's not a coincidence at all. All these students did was examine simple ratios between what is too long or too wide or too tall. And what they settled on is the same ratio of these three dimensions as cargo shipbuilders already knew back when this story was written. Because we know that the story of Noah's Ark is based on much older stories, themselves based on an even older real-life event or an inundation of the Euphrates River around 2900 BCE, wherein the Noah character was not Noah, but Ziusudra, and then later versions changed his name to Atrahasis or Utnapishtim and so on. And we know that the story of Noah was not written 5,000 years ago. Scholars of biblical history consistently say that the revised, highly embellished and exaggerated version that we now read in the Bible is only half that old. By the 5th century before our current calendar, tradesmen already had cargo ships, and they knew how to recognize what is ship shape. These quoted students calculated that if you use all the interior space provided in the dimensions given in this fable, you could conceivably fit in a couple million sheep and still float. However, that is without any consideration of food storage or fresh water or even oxygen, such as you would be required for this cargo. Modern livestock ships of the same size as Noah's Ark can only pack in thousands of sheep, not even tens of thousands, much less millions, because they need to carry so much food and fresh water just to voyage for a week or so. And they need massive ventilation with fans running, or else everything would overheat and suffocate immediately. And more important than that, all modern ships of the same size as Noah's Ark that only carry 16,000 sheep or so have to have a means of propulsion and also steering. Otherwise, in rough seas, one wave will turn the vessel against the second wave, which will then roll it over, killing everything on board. We have seen that at least a half dozen times just in the last decade or so. Noah's Ark, as it is described with these dimensions, would be no different, except that it's supposed to be made of wood, not steel, and at a size that is at least 4 times larger than a wooden ship could possibly be without disintegrating under its own weight, even without cargo. Plus, the fable says it was just a box without propulsion or steering. It would be grossly overloaded and not at all ventilated with no provisions, and that wouldn't matter because everything on board would be dead by the end of the first day, even in calm seas. We know that. There's no sense trying to pretend otherwise. Noah's Ark is a sick, ridiculous fable that is indefensible scientifically, logically, and even theologically. It cannot bear any critical analysis whatsoever. We know for certain that there was never a global flood, And we have known that for centuries because several independent fields of study can show that not only that it couldn't happen, but we have proof that it didn't happen, even if it could have. If you're still trying to make believe that there was a flood, trying to convince yourself that it happened when we've already proved that it couldn't and didn't, then you're trying to be stupid. The time to give up on that myth was the same age as when you gave up on Santa Claus, and for some of the same reasons, too.